Hey, this is Colin speaking, and now it's time for part 2 of my favorite top 10 extinct steam locomotives. Number 8. The Union Pacific's Feather Challenger class, or better known as the CSA type. By the 1930s, the Union Pacific needed new locomotives to handle freight trains over Sherman Hill and the Wasatch Mountains in Utah. Their 412-2 locomotives, better known as the Union Pacific class, couldn't handle the tight curves, so Arthur Feather designed the CSA class, better known as the early Challenger designs. These locomotives were built by Alco in the 1930s as part of the 3900 class of Challengers. The Feather class Challengers had proven to be reliable to handle the heavier freight loads that the 412-2s couldn't handle on the mountain's twists and turns and gradients. With their 69-inch diameter drive wheels, these Feather Challengers can be found across the Union Pacific system, and they were oil-burning locomotives. But later years, when more Challengers were arriving on the system, the Feather-class Challengers were eventually renumbered to the 3800 series to make room for more Challenger-type locomotives, better known as the Heavy-class Challengers. But sadly, however, when the dieselization came on the Union Pacific, none of the early Challengers of the Union Pacific have been preserved. These were all retired, withdrawn, and sadly cut up for scrap. It was quite an unfortunate end for the Feather-class Challengers to be cut up. But it would have been nice if one of these could have been preserved, right on display in a museum, to see what the UP's early Challengers were like. Number 7. The Southern Pacific GS1's 484 Northerns. These were the first 484 Northerns that were built by Baldwin in the 1930s for the Southern Pacific Railroad, as well as the subsidiary Texas and New Orleans Railroad. These locomotives were built during the Great Depression in America as new motive power, since their Southern Pacific 482s were having trouble keeping up to timetables. These 484s had powered numerous passenger trains across the Southern Pacific system, as well as the San Francisco to San Jose commuter runs. However, lately on Christmas in December of 1931, GS1 4402 had suffered a bad boiler explosion, but was eventually repaired and put back into service. Eventually, the GS1s would eventually end up being renumbered to the 700 series. It's when they were on loan to the Texas and New Orleans Railroad. But ever since that boiler explosion of 4402, none of the GS1s from the Southern Pacific Railroad have been preserved. They were all scrapped in the 1950s and replaced by diesel power. A rather unfortunate end for the early Southern Pacific General Service class of Northerns. Number 6. The Northern Pacific's A-class 484s. When the Northern Pacific needed new locomotives for their passenger service, they turned to Alco Locomotive Works, which had designed the first A-class Northerns in 1927, right before the Santa Fe had even purchased Santa Fe 3751. With their 73 or 77-inch and their drive wheels, the 484s were capable of handling both freight and passenger service. Locomotive number 2626 was equipped with Tinkin roller bearings and was the famous Tinkin engine, and originally number 1111. Little known fact, the A5s of the Northern Pacific had held the world steam record for a journey of 999 miles from St. Paul to Livingston, Montana without an engine change. Sadly, however, none of the Northern Pacific had preserved any of their A-class Northerns. Along with engine 2626, they were eventually all withdrawn and scrapped in the 1950s. If smaller engines from the Northern Pacific were preserved, why can't the NP preserve some of their finest steam power, like their Northerns, for example? It would have been great to see. And that's it for part 2 of my top 10 favorite extinct steam locomotives.